batteries. They made 3 battalions instead of 2. And of course, that summer, what was it? Anyway, we went to summer camp. Usually we were only gone 2 weeks. That year, 3 weeks we had to go for because the scare of the war was coming.
All right, so this was before.
Before.
Yeah.
So when we got out at the end of August, they told us, they said, you'll be in here before you know it. You're going to be federalized, you know? And we were. It took about a week, and they had us every day go up to the armory in Milford, and we were breaking in new recruits, teach them how to march and stuff like that for 1 whole week. And that week, some of the older timers that were in the guards for years and they were married and had jobs and all that, you know, they were able to get out. To get discharged, they didn't have to go with us.
Wow.
So the rest of us...
Honey, he wants to know, were you drafted or did you sign up?
Oh, it was in the National Guard. Automatically you were in.
Automatically you're in?
It just federalized us, you know?
Yeah. So,
So we were in the Army of the United States and in the National Guard. It was out.
All right. Let's see. So you were in the National Guard throughout the entire process? You were in the National Guard from start to finish, or did they branch you off?
Oh, they said I got discharge papers from the National Guard.
Oh.
1940. 1940, that's what it was.
Well, do you remember where you were when you figured out that you were going to be going to war? Like that time when you knew you were going to leave Connecticut and head overseas?
At the time?
Yeah.
It was, let's see, September 16th of 1940.
Wow. That's right at the beginning.
And we had a report to Milford, and they put us on a train, and they took us up to New London. That's where we used to go to summer camp, out on the islands. Fort Mikey was the only island that time that was being used by an Army outfit, a regular Army outfit, 11th Coast Artillery. And we were like in a tent city down near the shore, and they had a regular post there, you know, parade ground, and they had old timers living there that lived with their families or their wives, you know. And
would you say you were drafted?
Well,
or you signed up?
No, they just took us.
Yeah.
You know. As long as you weren't had a reason to get out, you know, you went. That was your job. That's why you were in there. In fact, my boss wanted me to get. At that time, I was working at Bridgeport Post, a newspaper, and my boss wanted to get me deferred, so I didn't have to go. So the next meeting I went up to my commander and I told him about it. And I says, I don't want to be deferred. I want to go with my outfit. He says, I'll take care of that.
Wow.
So I went with him. And we went on the train, went to New London, went out on Fort Wright, and that's Fisher's Island, New York. But it's off the coast of Connecticut.
Sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard that.
It's still there, but the Army post is gone.
Where'd you go from there?
Well, from there, I was there approximately 2 years and something. And I went from there to El Paso, Texas. And they had a big new setup outside of town. There was a big Air Force outfit there. There was all kinds of military, different units, you know, other than anti-aircraft. That's what we were in. Anti-aircraft, 90 millimeter guns we had. Before that, they were only 75 millimeter they had up on the island there. There were fixed mounts. These were mobile. You had wheels to pull them behind big trucks, you know, and move them wherever you wanted. That's when we got down to Texas. It was Logan Heights, right outside El Paso, Texas. And from there, it was, we were training out in the desert from there, like say about 30, 40 miles out into the Texas desert. And I think at the time they expected to use us over in North Africa, but it changed after things got better out there, and then they realized they were going to send us out in the South Pacific, where there was.
So this was like the early 40s, like this was like the early 1940s now, or so. All right, I don't know if it was pre-war.
So anyway, about I think it was, I don't know. I think it was about at the end of December in 42. Finally, I got called in the office one day by my captain and my first sergeant. They said, "You got any money?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, how would you like to go home on furlough? We'll give you a 15-day furlough." So I went up on the telephone, I called her up, and I says, "You want to get married?" I says, "I'm coming home on furlough." And so she says, okay, she'd get ready to get marriage license and all that, whatever she had to do. And I got my tickets for the train. You didn't fly in them days, you had to go on a train. But we got married on March 29th, 1943.
Right.
Yeah, I come home for 15 days. We spent a few days in New York after I got married, and then I had to get back.
All right, give him a chance to get.
Yeah, no, more. I like it. The more talking, the better. So when were you first? When were you deployed? Did you head overseas?
When I got back from that trip, they were already starting to pack up stuff, you know, that our company had a guy they called a carpenter. They brought in lumber and they made boxes to fit everything we had to ship, which was a good thing they did, because it was easier to, you know, get it to the ship and get over there with it. At the same time, we had a bunch of musical instruments that different ones of us played, and we boxed even in a big fiddle, bass fiddle.
Yeah.
We even based that, made a box to fit that in, and we got it over there so we could use it. But this was after we got our trainer. I became a mess. I was supposed to be a mess sergeant. That's how I was getting out of the islands up here, just to get out of there and get off the island. You know, get on the mainland. So before we got shipped to Texas, they found a guy that was a cook. He wanted to be a mess sergeant. So they asked me if I wanted to be a supply sergeant. I said, sure, as long as I get trained for it. So that's what I ended up with, being a supply sergeant the rest of the time I was in.
So what does a supply sergeant do? What does a supply sergeant do?
What's he do?
Yeah.
Well, he has to take care of all the equipment, know where it is in black and white. You had to, anything that got issued to you, you had to make a record of it and sign it out to different parts of your outfit to be responsible for it and to be able to use it and learn to use it. And of course, most of this didn't happen until I got to Texas. For about a month or so, I sat on the island up here waiting for the orders. There was about 20 of us, one officer, one lieutenant, and the rest of us were enlisted men that went on this cadre. We didn't know where we were going until we got there. They put us on a train, and we knew we got to Chicago. We knew we left there, we were heading someplace, and we ended up in El Paso, Texas. We got off the train, and they sent us out in this new big old unit. They were training anti-aircraft people. Some were 90 millimeter, some were 50 caliber, machine gun, and whatever, you know, something to do with airplanes. So we trained there, like I say, until I went, and then I come back from getting married, and everything we had boxed up, all the equipment, you had to make so many copies of each. So the company commander, if he wanted to know where something was, you go to the boxes. They were numbered and with some kind of insignia on there that the people on the boat knew what went with what outfit. You know?
So you took a ship overseas? Yeah. All right. Where did you first go?
Well, the first place we went was California.
Mm-hmm.
From Texas, we went to California, and part of it was let's see. Yeah, we went down. We got on a boat. No, we went to. Some town in California. It was a huge place where they were getting the troops together and till they were ready to put them on a boat or whatever way they were going, you know. Camp Stoneman.
Okay.
That was in California. And we were probably there a couple of weeks before we got our orders to get down to the boat, which was right by the big bridge down there, and where Alcatraz is.
Oh, the down San Francisco?
Yeah.
Yeah, Golden Gate. Yeah.
So I remember one trip being supply sergeant, I had to take a boat or a truckload of bags of laundry into San Francisco to a laundry there, and gentleman launder didn't bring them back to the outfit. Of course, all our clothing was marked with the numbers anyway, so they know who belonged to what. And we got orders to get on this big ship, which was from the country of Holland. that ship was caught away from home. It was over this way, and our government took it over to use it as a troop ship. And that's right there by the bridge of San Francisco. We loaded on from this ferry boat onto that. And yeah, we came up from Stolman on the ferry boat, and then we got on a big ship. And we're, I think, on there just overnight. And woke up the next morning for reveille, and the boat was already going under the bridge, the Bay Bridge, heading out Pacific Ocean. And I don't know if I can tell you what the date was. Probably on my discharge papers or something.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's.
But
did you know where you were going from there?
No, we didn't know where we were going. All we knew was a dirigible was following us for one day to make sure there was no Jap subs around that was going to follow you out.
What is that, like a patrol boat? Like out in front of you guys, or?
No,
just
a dirigible. You know, a blimp.
Oh, all right.
A blimp.
Yeah.
They flew out around us all day long until it got dark, and they went back into California. And then we were on our own after that. So.
Was it just the one ship, or did you guys go out in a few of them?
One ship.
Oh,
there
wow.
was nobody else around us. And we just kept going and going. They claimed we were going a zigzag course, so the subs couldn't find you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We're on that boat for 30 days. And we finally ended up and pulled into a place, New Caledonia. That's way down by Australia.
Is that an island?
An island.
An island down there?
It belonged to the French.
Mm-hmm.
And we got off of that boat with our Barks bags and whatever else we had, you know, our rifle, our pack, and everything. And they put us in a temporary camp. And I can remember it rained like everything. Oh, it was so wet there, and it was slippery walking in the muck, you know. Anyhow, must have been there 3 or 4 days. Finally, we got orders to get back down to the dock and get on another ship that was going to take us, like, heading north. And we got all located on that all right and heading up north, and we were heading for New Caledonia.
Mm-hmm.
That sound right? No.
New Caledonia.
Oh, okay.
I think so. New Caledonia.
I'll have to think.
All right, let him fire another question.
No, what did you let's see, when you were on the ship, like how long did it take you heading out from across the Pacific?
About 30 days.
Oh, it was about 30 days.
They, whatever route they took, you know, it just took that long. There was no hurry, I guess,
yeah,
as far as getting us out there, because
Did you know any of the a lot of the people you were with, or had you just met them in California? A lot of the other soldiers.
well, you know all the about 110, 112 people in your own outfit.
Mm-hmm.
You know that I had a record of all of them, including 3 or 4 officers that belonged to our battery, and because I had to have it for laundry purposes, for one thing, and for all the records, I had to keep everybody's rifle, their rifle number, all different kinds of equipment like helmets, backpacks, and all, and one thing another, ammunition belts. I'm trying to think of at them days we wore leggings, but we got away from that. But when we left California, it took all our dress uniforms away from us because we were going into warm climate. So everything was suntans, like, you know, light tan shirts. We didn't have no jackets.
Yeah.
And Guadalcanal, that's where the first place we landed. And coming into that place at night, I was on duty and up on the front of the ship, and you could see the planes that were firing at whatever. You know, the Japs were still there, and our troops were on the ground. They took over an air base there, but the Japs kept coming back at night, we found out, and trying to recapture the place, I suppose. But that next day, we landed up near the shore with the ship, and they made us all get off. And we went on shore, and they had a big open area that was where we set up pup tents. And we had to stay in them for a few days. And at nighttime, you had to run for the places they had to get under cover, like made out of logs from trees, and had a top over it, you know. When the signals went off, they blew the air horns on the big trucks, and that was the air raid. So you got out of your pup tent and you ran up the road till you got to one of them things, and you got inside there until the raid was over. They blew the whistle again, you know.
Wow.
And we did that, like I say, for less than a week. And the daytime, there was nothing to do, so we're on the shore, we're in swimming in the bay there, you know, and the planes were coming back from raids, and they'd come down near us, and they flip the wings, you know, and get
Or
ready
these
to land.
our planes you're talking about?
Planes,
Yep.
yeah.
Coming back. What, there was an Air Force, you were on an Air Force base, or were they going to somewhere else?
Oh, they were our Air Force.
Yeah.
At that time, they called it Army Air Force. Now it's Air Force.
Air Force,
now,
Navy,
you know,
yeah.
They're separated. They're not connected with the Army. But anyway, we got all our orders to get back on a landing craft, you know, that the fronts drop off when you pull up to the shore, and you get out of them.
Yep.
Across the bay, that same bay we're in, we went over to a place called Florida Island. It was on the other side, like, you know, way across, like looking across Long Island Sound here, you know. And we got off over there. They sent us up on like a big hill, like a mountain. They had a dirt road up to it, and they hauled all our stuff up there. Our trucks came and everything. And we sat up there, because down and back was a big bay where the Navy ships were down in there, just sitting there. But they had these air balloons up tied to them, so the Jap Air Force couldn't come in and try to bomb them. They get tangled up in them things. And geez, we were up there, oh gosh, on that, in that outfit there for maybe a couple of months or maybe 3 months. All of a sudden, orders come out from the headquarters there somewhere that they wanted so many men to ship back to New Caledonia because they had a bunch of new GIs that were trained, basic training in the States, and they're shipping them over there, and they're taking so many of us that are to train these guys into anti-aircraft experience, you know?
Yeah.
At first, the commanders of all these batteries that had to send help, they were sending the guys who were goof-offs, you know? They put them on the list. Well, the head guy, general, got wind of it, and he sent orders, you send the guys that have got the most time in the service. That's what we want down there. So I got picked because they wouldn't take my assistant in the supply room.
Yeah.
They had to take me. Well, a whole bunch of us had to get on the boat when the date came, back to New Caledonia. We were back there for 10 months training this new outfit and got equipment come in for them and everything before we got orders to move out of there. By that time, they're getting ready. They wanted to invade some of the islands up around the Philippines.
Okay.
And other islands up that way too, you know, because it was getting time to start thinking about whether you're going to have to go into Japan or what, you know.
Where did you think you were gonna go, or did you have any idea, or were you you were just wherever they send you?
They never tell you nothing. They never tell you nothing because, you know, rumors start and, you know, and the first thing you know, somebody in the Japanese army finds out about it or something, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, what they did was they got us all back on a ship from New Caledonia and headed us north. We knew we were going up to where there's more action. We got up to the where we were stationed before. So it was Thanksgiving time that year, 1944. They anchored the ships that were in the convoy and they unloaded everything, guns, trucks, everything, off onto the shore just for overnight, just to show you what you had to do in order to get on shore when you got to where you're going to meet the enemy.
How long did that take to take it all off, you think?
Probably took most of the day.
Okay.
They got there, and in the meantime on the ship, I don't know if it was the same day or the next day now, but anyway, we got orders to get back on the ship. It must have been, that was Thanksgiving Day. We got back on the ship and they had full course turkey dinner for us all. It was just like home, everything. You know, it was certainly good. So here we are, we're back on the ship and we're going to start off again first thing in the morning, and we're heading north. And at that time, I guess they got their eyes on up around where I end up, the Philippines. Yeah, they're getting ready to, they're already invaded some of the islands in the Philippine group, the lower ones. But where Manila is, that's the big island. So anyway, we stopped up there. I remember it was on New Year's Day. They let us all off onto the island of Peleliu. Island of Peleliu, which is off to the side before you get to the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For a whole, we didn't have to unload equipment or anything, but just everybody was off. They're gonna go on the island, you're gonna play ball, you're gonna play horseshoes, you're gonna make a day of having some fun with the guys and everything, you know. But back on the boat at the nighttime, and they had another turkey dinner, full dressing, everything, for New Year's Day.
Wow.
And it must have been New Year's night. Okay. After that was over, then they pulled anchor and we heading for the Philippines. And I think it was the next couple of days we got over, we were going amongst all the Philippine islands, the lower ones. And I can remember one of the islands, I think it was called Mindoro. And we could see our troops were, the ships were all against the shore and fighting the Japs, you know, shooting at the Japs, and our planes were flying around, and their planes, I guess. You could see it, like looking from the ship as we're going by. Our convoy, which was about, we picked up a lot of ships on the way after we left Peleliu. There must have been probably about 25 or 30 ships. So a couple of them were aircraft carriers, the rest of them were troop carriers, carrying troops and equipment or whatever. And we got on would be the western side of the Philippine Islands, and starting up through to go to a place called Lingayen Gulf. It was a big gulf that was up above Manila, and it was about January 4th of 1945. The Marines and the infantry got in there on the 2nd and made their landing, and we came in on the 4th. Now when we woke up that morning, went up on deck to see where we were, and it was so foggy you couldn't see nothing. But after a while the fog lifted. There looked like thousands of ships of ours in this big bay, and the small boats, landing crafts were going back and forth from all these ships, loading equipment, loading troops.
Were the Japanese there, like, waiting, or were they pushed back already?
Oh yeah, they were on the shore waiting for our guys, you know, trying to shoot at them and one thing and another as they're landing. A lot of the landing crafts didn't get to the beach. They sunk right there, maybe 50 yards from shore, and they dropped the doors and the water come in, and they had to walk up to their waist in water to get them out of shore. Well, anyway, I was fortunate enough to stay on the ship for an extra day to help guide these guys with the lifts that were bringing the equipment out of the hulls of the ship, and getting it lowered down into the landing crafts. And so I stayed on for an extra day. The rest of my outfit went on shore. And by the time the next day came, everything was unloaded, and they put us, we had to climb down the rope ladders to get into the landing craft, then take us into the shore. We got into the shore all right. They dropped the door, and they told us where we had to go to meet the rest of our outfit. So it was in a ways, but not that far, because you could see the planes flying around, our planes, flying around and just keeping an eye and make sure the jet planes weren't coming around, you know, to try to bomb the guys that were lined up on the beach and waiting for orders where they had to go. And we got into where our outfit was, and they put us in rice paddies, but they were dry. It was a dry season for the rice, so it was just dirt, but it was hard packed stuff. And they told us all we carried was an entrenching tool, like a little shovel. When you opened it up, it was about that long.
Yeah,
Wait a sec.
just a minute there, Con.
All right.
So anyway,
You're in the.
they warned us that night. We hadn't gotten our field kitchens off the boat yet. We hadn't got our trucks and equipment that we're supposed to get. We're just there, guys with their packs and their rifles and stuff, and the word got around that you better try to dig your foxholes because the Japs are right up in the foothills up here, and they're shooting down at nighttime. Like, you know, they had like some kind of a cannon on a railroad track. They bring it out of a tunnel, shoot a couple of rounds, and
Go back
disappear
in.
it back in
Excuse
so
me.
our planes couldn't see them.
Yeah.
My son wants to know why you are here.
Oh, so where was it? And we're digging the foxholes, and it was tough digging.
Tough day.
With those little
With just a little one?
shovels, and it was like hard pan because they always water on them when they're growing their rice, you know.
Mhm.
So anyway, we worked our tails off trying to get them dig enough so you get below the surface of the ground, you know.
Were you trying to get it over your head, like, or just so you
Well,
could crouch
you're
down?
laying down in it,
Yeah. All right.
and two men in a foxhole, side by side, laying down. And by the time night came, we had our foxholes pretty well dug so we could get in them.
Mhm.
So a couple of the guys, they built a little fire on the ground so they could heat the sea rations that they give us. They were like cans of spaghetti or beans or something like that. You could open the lid. You could eat them cold or you could heat them up, you know. And they had a little fire on the ground that they shouldn't have had. And up in the hills where they had that gun, they must have spotted it because it was dark already, you know.
Yeah.
And that's how
You can sit there. You can.
Excuse me.
That's how they were able to zero in on us.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, when they shoot them things, you could hear the noise. They're coming. Those projectiles.
Were they? They were like big artillery.
Oh yeah, it must
like,
have been probably at least 6-inch projectiles. You know, they shoot at them. There was something they captured from the Americans when they took over. All this stuff they took, you know, to use themselves. So anyway, all of a sudden, we heard this sound coming, and they hollered, "Get in the foxholes," you know, and we did. Well, you know, they fired 3 shells that night, and just past where our rice paddy was, where we were in the holes, one landed here, another one landed here, and another one hit a tree. Now, where the third one landed, it broke it off about 10 feet from the ground. It hit it and busted it right off a big palm tree. The other ones hit the ground, made a big hole, big as this room, when it landed. only one guy and a whole bunch of us, a piece of shrapnel fell in his foxhole, landed on his neck. And he hollered like a baby, you know. He was our mess sergeant. And the one officer that we had, a lieutenant, he got out of the hole and he went over to see how bad he was, and he found, yeah, he just got a little burn on his neck, he'd be all right, and he got back in his hole. But anyway, after that raid that night, we called it a raid, they fired some more. There was an outfit that was camped just beyond us in another field, like.
Mm-hmm.
Two guys got hit that night. They were out of their hole, and they got hit and got killed. So they shouldn't have been out walking around or whatever they're out for. We heard about it the next day. The guys over there told us about it. So anyway, we said, well, we're not going to stay around here, the bunch of us that were together. We're going to take what we can. We'll leave the equipment that we had, the stoves to cook on, what they call field ranges. And if our trucks don't get here and pick us up and pick up the stuff, we're going to get out of this area because they're going to shoot that same area, you know. So it was starting to get near dark. And everyone wondering, where the heck is our trucks? They're supposed to come off the boat today, you know. We started off the road, probably maybe like a couple hundred yards up this old dirt road we were heading. Here come our trucks coming toward us. They came in that way. We could tell because all our equipment and our trucks especially had the same emblem on the bumper that we had on all our boxes. So we knew what outfit they went to.
Yep.
And so we turned around, we jumped on the trucks and went back. So we picked up our field ranges or what other equipment we had we were carrying, got them into the, I think it was either 2 trucks or 3 trucks we got that night. And we headed out in the dark. The drivers knew where they had to go. They had instructions, and we got out of that area, and you know, we traveled just about all night long. Wherever they knew they were going, we were on the trucks. And once during the night, the air raid signal went off, and the trucks stopped, and they said to get under the trucks or over the side of the road, like a ditch.
Yep.
That's where we all got until the air raid was over. And we got back in the trucks again and headed. Well, anyway, the next day we headed into, we're going to have a drink of water. I'm talking too much.
No problem.
Let
Let's
him.
see. We were at, we were at.
We were traveling that night under blackout conditions. You couldn't see nothing. And all they had are little slits on the headlights of the trucks that they could use because the Japs were flying around trying to spot us. So anyway, up the island, it was roughly, I couldn't tell you, 30 miles or so from where we were. Anyway, we ended up the next day in a big air base that our Army Air Force used during peacetime. They had barracks there. This is all old stuff though. Wooden barracks. They had an airfield there and a place where the airplanes, they parked them and everything. And they put us right on the outskirts of it, because that was our job, to set up our 90mm guns to shoot at airplanes. And they put us in tents on like platforms, you know. In fact, I think they didn't have any platforms. They just had the tents there first to go into. Later on, we were able to get material to make a floor for our tent. I think 6 or 8 of us slept in one pyramidal tent, or whatever they call them. And so things were pretty quiet around there. For one thing, the Japanese were having some kind of a get-together with their pilots down in the city, Manila. And the Filipinos that were on our side, they found out about it. And they alerted the Air Force, and they came in and they bombed that building where the meeting was, and they killed most of the pilots, the Japanese pilots.
Wow.
And when we got up to Clark Field, where this air base was, that was Clark Field. The planes they had parked around the sides of the runway and everything, they weren't able to use them because they didn't have no pilots. Most of them got killed.
Wow.
So our Army guys got in there and they used flamethrowers, and they burned out the cockpits in all these Japanese planes so they couldn't use them. So we had no problem with the Japs coming over and dropping bombs on us. It was no Air Force needed, you know?
Yep.
So the only thing they did, some of them that they captured, they didn't damage. Our Air Force used a couple of them, they told us ahead of time, they're going to fly them around to let us see what they look like and one thing or another, you know? So we wouldn't shoot at them.
Yeah, right?
But, I mean, these are the things that you do, you know?
Yep.
So anyway, we got set up pretty good around that air base with our Jeeps that we had to run around with, and we talked to a lot of the Filipinos who got the, army cots, metal cots that you could put a mattress on. I guess the Japs got them first, and then when they got out of there, the Filipinos that lived around there, they put them in their own huts, because otherwise they sleep on like a bamboo floor. You know, they had in these thatch huts they had. Anyway, we had a little more comfort. We put a floor in our tents. I'll tell you that afterwards. After we were there a few months and things were pretty quiet, every morning as our planes were using the airstrip there and the facilities, they were loading them up with bombs and whatever, and they were flying to Formosa, which was up the line a ways toward China, like, and bombing, because the Japs were still holding out in them places. Every morning these big B-24s they brought in, and they filled them with bombs and machine gun bullets and all that. And 6 o'clock in the morning we'd fall out in front of our tents for reveille. You could hear the planes revving up on the end of the strip. They're going to take off. And they would go up to Formosa, and they'd be back about maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon before they'd get back. And you could tell they had a successful flight and bombing, because they do a couple maneuvers coming over the airfield, you know.
Yeah.
Well, one incident that happened was the fighter planes, what they call it, P-47s, I think they were. Anyway, they had the twin tail on them, but they were a fighter plane.
Mm-hmm.
They flew along with these bombers to protect them.
Yep.
And they come back, and the stuff they would do with those planes before they'd land them, you know. Well, one of them had a bomb hanging underneath that the guy didn't know about, the pilot. And they come down over the field by where the hangars were, and there was guys out there like doing repair work on some of the bombers that were needed work. Now when he took off to head up as far as they could go before they flop over and come down, that bomb dropped off and it landed right down on the cement way there where the guys were working on a couple airplanes. Killed some of them.
Wow.
The bomb went off. And the guy, when he got up as high as that plane went, I think it was P-38s,
Mm-hmm.
twin tails, he dropped out, come out in his parachute, and come down on the ground, and he saved his life. The plane just fell down and crashed on the ground.
Oh, wow.
But like I say, he was in the formation he was in. He was the rear man, but the other pilots up front of him didn't know there was a bomb hanging underneath that didn't release.
Wow.
That's one of the things that happens, you know. And another thing I wanted to tell you about experience I had while I was there. One day I took over post number 1 out by the road while the outfit went in for lunch at noontime. And while I was on duty there, I see this Filipino come out of one of the officers' tents, and he had a bag. He sneaked in there while the officer was eating and found out he had about 4 cartons of cigarettes he stole off of the officer. Well, anyway, when I saw him, he ran across this road into an open field, and I picked up the phone and I called the motor pool. I said, send up a Jeep. I says, somebody's stealing something from the officer's tent. So right away the guy jumped in the Jeep. He come up and picked me up. And we went out across the field and chasing the guy, and we caught up to him. And when he got up to him, I jumped out of the Jeep. I says, drop what you got in your hand. I hit him with my rifle and I knocked him down, you know. Hit him in the arm or whatever. And picked up the bag he had. There was, like I say, 4 cartons of cigarettes. I says, okay. Grabbed him by his arm, put him in the back of the Jeep, and I sat there. I said, you're going to go back and you're going to give him the back, you see that. So we got back to the outfit and went in, and it was this major's tent that he went in. And so he says, let's have a little fun with him. He says, and find out where he's from. Well, he was over from some neighborhood beyond where we were camped. And he says, let's form a circle, the whole outfit. We'll go out of the mess hall, we'll make a circle with a guide. I'll put him out in the middle of it and see if he'll try to get away, you know?
Yeah.
Every time he got away, somebody pop him one, you know, and knock him down. And finally, after a while, they let him go, and he went across like a river or something, a small river, and went into where he belonged. And so we let him go as long as he got his cigarettes back, you know.
That's funny.
Well, one other incident I had right there at that same place, being a supply sergeant, I had to go out once in a while to the warehouses to get equipment, whatever I had to pick up. And the truck driver, we're going along the dirt road right beyond where one of the airstrips where they were getting planes loaded up at night time so they could take off in the morning. We're going along this dirt road, and right, it was like a gully, and I'm looking out through the bushes, you know, as we're going along, and I see somebody down in the bushes there. So I says to the driver, says, go up the road a ways, we'll turn around, somebody's down in there. Like they say, these Japs are trying to blow these planes up at nighttime, you know, after dark. So he went up the road a short ways, turned around and come back over. Then we came back the same way. As soon as I told him to stop, I was right above where the guy was. And I jumped out of the truck with my rifle and I hollered to the guy, come up out of there. And he got up, he had hand grenades on him and a rifle, and he came up to the top of the hill. I said to him, you're under arrest. So we took him back to a headquarters that wasn't too far. It was up in where his main other permanent camp was. They made a headquarters up there. Took him up there and turned him in, and whatever they did with him, I don't know. But we took off after that because
that's interesting. So what was that getting towards the end of your
pardon?
Was that getting towards the end of your
just about
stay,
that? Things happened after that. They dropped the bomb on Japan, and they come out with the point system, and the guys that had the most points were the first ones they were going to let go home. Well, I was number 2 in my outfit. My captain, who come from Stratford, he was with the Bridgeport National Guard and he went to OCS. When I met him out there, he come into the outfit, he was already a captain. And he got assigned to headquarters of my outfit, my battalion, and he was first to be sent home. The first, it only took one. So they told me, you get yourself ready now, turn your stuff in that you can't pick with you. You'll go when the next order comes out, you'll be going. So I was number 2 about a month later, and I got my orders to get down to the dock. They had a building there where they kept you until the boat was ready to take you on, you know. And that was, of course, we had to come back to the States under blackout conditions because they said some of the Jap subs but probably weren't notified that the bomb was dropped and the war was over, and they might shoot at the ship that's taking you guys back home, you know.
Sure. Well, I just want to change this quick. I just ran out.
Nobody could get off the ship and go in there. I thought maybe they'd let us there for a day or so. We could see, you know, what it looked like and one thing or another. I guess the next morning or so, they just waited for other ships to come away to California.
What was it like when you found out you were coming back home? Were it was an excitement party?
Oh, I'll tell you what I did. They called me aside before we knew about the bomb, and they said you can go down. You go down to headquarters and take your IQ over because it isn't high enough right now for what you might run into. You know what they had to offer. They wanted me, being a supply sergeant, to stay there after the rest of the outfit went home, and I would help take in supplies, trucks, guns, whatever the guys couldn't take back home with them, you know. And eventually you'll probably work your way up from a staff sergeant to junior, what they call it?
Tech.
I had a chance to be tech sergeant over the supply and the whole battalion, but one guy that had worked in there for a while with the captain that was in charge, he wanted to make that guy, and I thought to myself, hey, I'm not staying in this army all my life. I want to get out because I had about 3 years apprenticeship in a newspaper in Bridgeport, and I want to get home and finish my 6 years so I become a journeyman. Then I could go where I want to work as a union printer. And I had a chance to become a junior warrant officer if I took this job. And I refused it. I said, I'm not staying here. They tell me I can go home, I'm going, because I want to finish my apprenticeship. I'm not going to stay in the Army all my life. Some of the guys stayed in. I met them years later. We had reunions. And I met some of the guys that stayed in for 20 years. You know, some of our farm boys from out west, and they didn't want to go back to what they grew up, you know. So they got drafted in, and they saw that there was a pretty good life to stay in.
Yeah, right. What was it like when you were first home? What'd you do to fill your time? Did you go right back to work?
Well, they had a setup where within I don't know what it was, but so many weeks or days or whatever it was, if you went back to your own job, they had to hire you back. So I got back, and of course we were married then, and she was living with her mother and father, and that's where I went to live, you know, until we found a place to live. So I don't know.
But
I went over, I guess I went over to Stratford where I took off from and got my belongings and clothes. And I had a motorcycle that I left back home. I picked that up from a guy that took care of it for me while I was away, an older man.
Yep.
He was from the dealers anyway. But we managed, her father got tenants out of the first floor and gave us the rent. And after a few years, her mother died, then her father died a couple of years later, and the place went up for sale and didn't sell right away. So her older brother and sister, who were in charge of selling it, they made up their mind they're going to sell it. Or they're going to drop the price, that's what it was. Going to drop the price and see if they find a buyer. So I says to her, I says, why don't we buy it? We already had a lot where we're going to build a house just up the street a couple of blocks. So she says, yeah, why don't we buy it?
it was
We'll have
income
rent.
property then,
We'll have
and
two
that was
rents
worth
coming in.
something.
Yep.
And so we said, well, what are you going to drop the price to? And they told us. I says, we'll buy it. So
There you
put
go.
the works through the real estate people, and we bought it.
Beautiful.
And our three boys were born there, grew up there pretty well, and they were in school. When we decided, well, there's a lot of old work to the old place and everything. All I was doing was repairing things and had a lot of property to take care of, you know. Had a 4-car garage in the back and all that, you know.
Right.
So we
Well,
decided to look back in Stratford, where I come from, you know.
yeah.
So we found a house over there, and we sold it, the old place, and what we got for it, we put it on the other place. It was a few years old, but it was in a nice part of town, up the northern part of town, and
Happily ever
there.
after.
we were there until we decided to sell that.
And then,
Went into an apartment house down in Stratford Center, and in the meantime we found out where we could buy down in Florida through her brother and her cousin who are already down there.
Mhm.
It was an old military post where where they were bringing outfits in and training them to get off of landing boats for the incoming invasion over there in Germany and France.
Mhm.
D-Day.
Yep.
Yeah, her older brother and sister, they were already up down there where they were reselling all these army units down there, apartments,
Mhm.
2 bedroom, 1 bedroom, 3 bedroom, stuff like that. It was a big complex, about over 400 apartments that people could buy into that wanted to retire there. So we went down, looked it over a couple of trips, and we decided to buy one. We liked,
There you
and we stayed in there for 25 years.
go. Jesus.
Yeah.
Man.
And we worked on it, and everybody owned your own apartment. You know,
Yeah.
there were only 1 story, no upstairs.
Yep.
So you had inside apartment instead of ends. You only had front and back windows. You had a upstairs like an attic. We put a disappearing ladder. We could store our winter clothes and then the
Junk.
summer clothes.
And junk.
Yeah, and
Oh.
we made out all right. And
Yeah.
we made a lot of more money when we sold it too,
Oh, God.
I
we
bet.
which was good.
Did
from
we
what
ever
paid
make
for it.
money on it?
Yep. I bet. Well,
So
beautiful. Well, I appreciate it very much.